WBNY, how can I help you?
I don't know who you are.
We're 91.3 FM, WBNY, Buffalo's original alternative since 1982, brought to you by the Buffalo State Student Activity Fee. We bring a unique blend of all types of music, including local music that is not available anywhere else. We offer a wide variety of talk shows and most Buffalo State sports, including football, basketball, and hockey.
I don't know what you want.
We just want you, the listeners, to follow us every day. Now broadcasting at 1,000 watts, you can listen to us from just about anywhere in Western New York.
I will look for you.
You can listen to us on your radio or online at WBNY.org.
I will find you.
That's great.
And I will kill you.
Okay, thanks for calling. Have a great day.
91.3 FM WBNY, Buffalo's original alternative. Brought to you by the Student Activity Fee here at Buffalo State College. This is All Talk Monday, WBNY's public affairs programming that airs Monday mornings till midnight. The views expressed in all the various All Talk Monday shows are not necessarily those of WBNY, the United Students Government at Buffalo State, or Buffalo State itself. Due to the opinionated nature of these programs, listener discretion is highly advised. If you have any questions or comments about All Talk Monday, you can direct them to WBNY's All Talk Monday, 1300 Elmwood Avenue, Buffalo, New York, 14222. For more information, check out our website at wbny.buffalostate.edu. Or you may give us a call at the station at 716-878-5104 and take part in all the various All Talk Monday shows.
Hey, listen to 91.3 WBNY, Buffalo's original alternative since 1982, brought to you by the Buffalo State College Student Activity Fee. It is October 5th and just after 5. I want to make sure everybody's in. Everybody doing good?
Hey, how's it going?
Hey. You can't hear anything.
Hi, everybody.
You doing good?
Are we good?
Okay.
I think.
Hey guys.
Okay. Okay.
I can't really hear the mic that well.
We can hear you.
I hear a beautiful laugh.
Yeah, you hear it now. You're fine.
All right, good.
Are you channel 1? Yeah.
Okay, some technical difficulties that we were working through.
Can you hear now, Sam?
Can my headphones be turned up just a little? Is that a possible thing we could do?
Is that good?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
All right.
Okay, I'm Jessica. We have Kayla, Farah, and me, and then we have 2 new guests, if everybody wants to say hi.
I'm Sam Feldman, and to my right,
I'm Joan Nobile.
What?
How you doing?
We have a lot of people in the studio right now.
Yeah, there's extra people. It's weird. Got microphone sharing.
Yep. Okay, so on today's episode, we are talking about gender stereotypes. Who would like to start the conversation off?
I think women are over-sexualized all the time, and men are left in the back, but they do still have issues with body image.
Yeah, I mean, I see both sides of it, but like more so as far as like women, because like sure there's like men like with like, you know, oh, you got to have your shirt off and like a 6-pack, but I feel like people are more critical when it comes to like challenging like women's image.
Right.
Yeah, I would agree as well. Like as far as just like how prevalent like the stereotypes are, like if you look at your basic sitcom, it's always kind of like the schlubby dude. Like you always see the like it's more accepted to have like a protagonist role for a male be very flawed and like be flawed in body image and be flawed with like ideologies and stuff, and then have the woman be a trophy or the woman be someone who has such a high standard to live up to that she ceases to be a character and more just like an object, you know?
Right. Yeah.
I think it's important to recognize that before we get into this discussion either about, you know, video games or whatever media we're talking about, a lot of the research is skewed primarily towards female body image. There isn't enough research in the stuff that I've done, which I hope we'll get to talk about later, that talks about how media representation affects men. As a matter of fact, I was looking at recent statistics, like something to the effect of 10 to 12%, it might be higher, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, of people faced with an eating disorder are men. And a lot of it has to do, part of it has to do with some of the representation of the stereotypes that men have to live up to. That being said, there's an overwhelming amount of data that shows that it affects women immensely more. And it's important to look at not just media representation, but culture and how it's sort of like a feedback loop of just negative stuff that you see all the time, not just in media, but in our society. So I think it's important to recognize all those facts if we're going to have a discussion on this.
I took actually documentary film analysis last semester, and it was specifically about sports, and the professor brought in like a bunch of just random magazines, and the assignment was to just look through and try to find how many females there were. And I think in like an 80-page magazine, there was like 5 images of females, and most of them were advertisements.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Like women's bodies, I should say, are used like for sexual appeal in advertising. Like that's a thing. Like if you can look at like cigarette commercials from like 1970, and it's still like it's the attractive woman smoking a cigarette that tries to like, it's supposed to be like entice women to look like that and men to want to get that, and it's just wrong. I think
if I just smoke a cigarette, then I'm gonna look like that.
Exactly. And that's not true. Like you just right.
Like the other day I saw a fast food advertisement, and it was a woman seductively eating a French fry.
But at the same time, then we'll turn around and shame people who are fat because they're eating too much. It's this weird, we have this weird relationship with food. Like women are supposed to be like sweat and thin and sexy, and you can like sexily eat a hamburger, but then you see a fat person in the street and people think it's okay to shame them because, oh, they're fat, they ate too much of that gorgeous food. You know, it's these sort of weird double standards for bodies that I never quite understood, at least in American culture. I don't know about the rest of the world.
Have you looked at the rest of the world?
No, not as of yet. A lot of my research that I've done has been very American-centric because that's where I live. Mm-hmm. I keep meaning to branch out whenever I get the chance. It's just time is a factor.
Yeah.
Something I've noticed that I find particularly creepy about just, I guess, cartoon characters, particularly cartoon characters who are supposed to represent like animals, like anthropomorphic animals. If you notice a lot of just like the male characters who are these like cartoon characters, like maybe like I don't know, like Donkey Kong or whatever, is supposed to actually look like an ape. He's supposed to look like a monkey, and like his build is like it's actually very similar to what you'd expect from an animal. But when you look at the female characters, it's like they just took some model's body and put a cartoon like head over it, and that's just something that I've noticed is like a reoccurring thing like throughout. I don't know if anyone saw the movie Inside Out, but did you notice in the lava short film beforehand, you have this this volcano man like singing about love and lava. Like I personally I enjoyed the little short film, but I noticed that like the volcano man, like he was shaped like a volcano. It looked like a volcano. Right. And then when he finds his true love or whatever at the end, who's a woman, it's boobs, like you can see her butt, like it's a volcano. We're sexualizing volcanoes in this country.
That actually goes all the way back to if you look at the old Disney films and Warner Brothers films, like look at Minnie and Mickey Mouse, for example. You've got the standard, which is Mickey, dude, mouse, and then you have Minnie, which is almost the exact same thing, just with a bow tie, a dress, and presumably breast. Mm-hmm. Right. So, and it's all about deviation, and it's about looking at that from that standpoint and going, oh, there's this stereotype that men only want like a female version of them, like a version of them with a vagina, pretty much. And that's all it is. I mean, if you look at games like Pac-Man, for example, the only difference between Pac-Man and Mrs. Pac-Man is a bow, the eyelashes, and some lipstick. It's very female coded. And that also sort of enforces the stereotype that all women need to be feminine, or all women need to be girly. And certainly there's no problem with that. But it sort of shows that thing that you can't have any sort of delineation without coding them as female like that. And it's a sort of weird gendered stereotype thing that's unnecessary nowadays, I think.
I think it's like real psychological from when we're young, from the colors that we should wear. Blue is for boys, pink is for girls. Then when you see like a girl playing with a G.I. Joe toy, a lot of women just say, no, you're not supposed to play with that. Here goes the baby doll. Yeah. It's like, why can't I play with this? It's just a toy. So I think like when we get older, it's still embedded in our brain and in society, which is crazy.
Well, and look at all the uproar over Target, I think it was, and they were saying, hey, we're going to get rid of our gendered aisles. It's just going to be toys. And people were throwing a fit over it. I think that speaks to your point very strongly.
Yeah. I don't agree with that, really. I don't agree with them trying to take down the titles, because if you're transgender, you're still going to identify yourself as a boy and a girl. You just going down a different aisle. Well, really the same aisle, but in a different. Your body is just different.
Do you think that having non-gendered aisles though would make it more difficult for them to like immerse, like for transgender people to immerse themselves in a culture in like our culture versus having a boys aisle and a girls aisle? Is what you're saying?
What? Say that again.
Oh, sorry. Like you disagree with it, and for your particular example, using transgender people as an example, you think that they still would gender themselves. They still would want to go down a particular aisle, like boys versus girls.
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, if you're a boy becoming a girl, you would go down the girl aisle. I see no reason why you should take off the title of the gender, you know?
Okay.
Unless you're gonna add a transgender aisle. That's basically what it seems like.
Well, I guess my thing is, if you're taking off the genders and you're just putting toys in like a big aisle, it wouldn't, to me, I guess it wouldn't matter, because you're regardless of your gender or your gender identity, you'd be going down that aisle anyway for your toys if there's no labeling of gender. So you could pick the boys, girls, or the girls' toys or whatever you want.
That was my mindset too. I would agree.
I think if you're going to take the gender stereotypes off of the aisles, then it might be easier to find your toys if you're looking in alphabetical order.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like if you're gonna take away like something that's like set into society, you need to change it and like add in something that's gonna be beneficial to, like, you know, because you don't want to just be like toys and then like, well, okay, I'm gonna spend 4 hours looking down a toy aisle for like a Barbie doll for like, say, even if you were gonna go with that for my like son that wants to be a little girl someday, you know, like I feel like you should alphabetize it, yeah, because like that would help, because then you could be like Barbie, that's gonna be in the B section.
Yeah.
Like,
I'm sure there'd be some organization or some like when you go to Toys R Us and they have those big signs above each section. I'm sure they do something like that. Like here's Barbie, here's Transformers, whatever.
When I was in first grade, the teacher was trying to assign, like, all the girls are supposed to read American Girl and all the boys are supposed to read Nate the Great. And I've just never, I don't know what she was trying to teach or what, but I didn't want to read American Girl and I wanted to read Nate the Great, and I was very upset. So at the end of the day, I remember putting the Nate the Great in my backpack because I was just going to read it at home. And she must have seen me or something, or she just knew, because she like I got suspended for it.
Are you kidding?
Kidding?
For stealing.
Wow. That see, I can understand separation of the sexes when it comes to things like, you know, you're a little kid and you're learning about your body. Then you want to separate and, you know, get used to your body first. But that's beyond ridiculous, frankly.
It was one of those things I'll probably never forget.
right.
Like
Oh my
gender
God.
shaming.
Right.
Basically, yeah.
Yeah.
See, my school never did anything like that. Like, I remember, like, when it came time, it was in, like, 6th grade to, like, talk about, like, bodies changing, because, like, that's about the time that, like, most people start, you know, going through puberty and stuff. And, like, it was just like, hey, boys are going to go look for worms. And then they would, you know, once the boys left, they would be like, okay, well, we're going to talk about, like, becoming a woman. And, like, that was, like, the only thing that really was, like, separated boys and girls.
I think that gives a certain amount of privacy, so.
Yeah, exactly. Like, it was like, and I mean, I don't know, I didn't talk to any of the guys, but like, I'm sure that they didn't just go look for worms, you know, that was just to get them out of the classroom.
But what do you think if they had flipped it and then like they brought the guys in to learn about girls and the girls went to learn about guys?
I mean, personally, I think that would be fine, but like at the same time, like I know plenty of parents that would have a huge issue with that at such a young age.
How old did you say that was again?
Like 6th grade, so that would be like 10 and 11.
Well, see, I think that's
not
an
too young,
appropriate
6th
time,
grade.
though, because, I mean, by that point, you're almost familiar enough with your own body, and you'd like to learn what the opposite sex has. I think that's perfectly natural to teach them, okay, this is the difference between boys and girls, and some of the differences in the hormones and things like that. Don't go too into detail, but I don't think that would hurt them in any way. I mean, we can talk about the abysmal sex education we have in America, but
it's terrible.
That's a whole topic.
Yeah. No, like I said, like I don't have a problem with it. I mean, I taught my little sister about everything that she needed to know about both genders when she was probably like 6th grade-ish, but like she was saying that like her school doesn't talk about anything like that, and I was like, you know, like that didn't happen to me either. Like my school was just like, this is what happens to girls, period. Like that's it.
Pun intended.
Pun intended. Absolutely.
Well, I feel
feel like too that if you introduce both genders to the kids at a young age, then I think we could grow up to be more accepting as a society and more understanding of the different genders. Because I think if you separate them while they're young, then that just gets into their head to stay separated.
It creates a divide.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, just the sex education, since this sounds like where it's a little bit headed, like, if we just taught the sex, all of it, like, one specific sex education and had to go through all of the appropriate channels to make sure that it was being taught right, rather than, like, I think it's only 13 states out of all the 50 that have actually gone through and made sure that everything is clinically accurate.
Wow, that's
Which is shameful,
That's
frankly.
not even half.
You're right.
Wow.
Okay, but let's head back into video games. So,
Yeah.
when people are first thinking about gender stereotyping in video games, like, what do you think are the first, the top names of video games that people are talking about?
Well, in my experience, I should clarify, I'm a big video game gamer, for lack of a better term. I've been playing games since I was a little girl, and my bachelor's thesis, I graduated from Buff State this past May, was on video games and representation and harassment of women, things like that. And I made a documentary about it. So the games that people most, the one that keeps popping up immediately is things like, Grand Theft Auto, the lack of females in Call of Duty, the representation of females in games such as like Assassin's Creed, the old ones like Leisure Suit Larry, though that's kind of obscure at this point. It's sort of the big AAA title games that you see, although it's getting better. We have strong female characters in games like The Last of Us, in the Metroid franchise. We had Samus Aran. In the Portal series, we have Shell, and GLaDOS is a great antagonist, even though she's a robot. Most of the arguments, however, that you get are that women are scantily clad, extremely thin, to the point of being, anatomically incorrect. And they're there just as trophies or as objects to be rescued. And there's actually some data to back up that research. In a 2007 study, they looked at different video game magazines. These couple of researchers, Dill and Thrill, I'm mispronouncing their names because I'm a terrible person. I apologize. They looked at different game magazines and advertising for games and screenshots, etc. They found that female characters were more likely than male characters to be portrayed as sexualized. We're talking 60% of the female characters to 1% of the males. 1%. That is a huge divide between how characters are presented. And scantily clad. 39% for the females and 8% for the males. It's that alone is very telling. How we are still marketing and portraying females, not just to gamers, but just looking at how women are presented in a medium that I enjoy and that many other people enjoy, and going, hey, we're still treating women like crap. And we're looking at them just as sexual objects for the sake of marketing and for the sake of marketing.
Right.
It kind of goes with all of the females that have changed their names to reflect a male name so that they don't get harassed.
Yeah, exactly. Or a gender-neutral name so that they don't have to deal with it.
Definitely.
I don't want to dominate the conversation. I have a lot of data and research stuff, so I want other people to talk before I get back into it.
I think it's interesting how you brought up Metroid as like an example of one of like a strong female character because in the game you play as this character Samus Aran, and she's like a lone bounty hunter. She doesn't answer to anyone, and from base value, she is a strong character and she is portrayed as a strong character, but at least in the older games, she's still a trophy. Oh yeah. By any means, like you play as this character and you go through and you immerse yourself as being this character, and she by all means is a strong character. But the better you do in the game, you get a screen at the end of the game. It says, "Oh, you won." The better you do, the less clothes she wears.
Yep.
So you're playing as a character, and you very well may identify with this character and really feel like empowered playing it, whether you're a man or a woman. But at the end of the game, if you do really well, though, she'll be sitting in a bikini and say, "Good job."
Exactly.
Good job, straight guys.
And that even goes back to the first Metroid, where if you put in the Justin Bailey code, she would take off her armor and reveal that she was a woman, which was very shocking at the time. And then she would just walk around in her, I guess, for lack of a better term, bikini throughout the whole game. And then she was always sort of sexualized. And even though she is a good example of a very strong or physically strong character, her and Lara Croft are like the big go-to when people say, "Oh, we have representation of women in games," and it's like, well, these characters are they've got their history of being also sort of crap at the same time. So it's important to look at them from like all angles here.
Have you ever played Blood Rain?
God, I haven't played that game in
a long time.
Long time. That's a long time.
When I'm thinking about like female bodies in characters, like Blood Rain's body is coming to my mind.
Oh yeah. And this was another character that was sort of, if I'm remembering the character correctly, was very sexualized.
Oh, definitely.
And then even look at the more contemporary characters like Bayonetta. Even though Bayonetta was designed by a female game designer, she's still very hypersexualized. And you can tell it's not just because of her movements or what she's doing. It's also because of the camera angles and the cinematography used in the games. They do up shots of her crotch. They focus on her breast. They focus on her butt. It's one thing to say I'm making a female character who is sexualized for the purposes of empowerment, and it's another to have cinematography that focuses only on their physical aspects. And I'm not just focusing solely on Bayonetta. I'm focusing on other
like
games
Mortal
as well.
Kombat. Even.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because like all the female characters, like they're like, you know, if you're like Sonya, you're wearing skin tight like workout clothes, or you have like, you know, like I don't even. Half of them, there's like I don't know 3 or 4 like female characters that are wearing like literally nothing. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. It's just like a kind of bra and like sort of panties, I guess, and then like, you know, they're just like throwing, you know, fans or like, you know, like it's just
when did what I don't know what kind of fan that it opens. When did that become a weapon?
Once you made it steel, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, but I mean, like, yeah, and then you have like the male characters who are just they all range from all over, but like all the female characters are very similar as far as their looks.
Right. Fighting games are always sort of a problem with that, though. I mean, especially when you look at like the early, like, even like the early Street Fighter and the early Mortal Kombat. Like Sonya was okay. She wore like a tank top, but she wore these long green pants, and she had, you know, sweatbands on. That she was at least professional looking. Nowadays, it's just we just throw out any pretense of that. Another fighting game that points out is Ivy. Soul Calibur.
Bring that up,
yeah. I mean, like in the first Soul Calibur game for the Dreamcast, she wears like this sort of dominatrix like outfit, but her secondary outfit is one that's very appropriate to her character and the story and everything else, like sort of a Victorian era thing. As each game in the series progresses, she loses more and more clothing for her first outfit, to the point where
she has like strings.
That's all it is, and it's like you can't tell me that is justifiable by any means except for marketing. I mean, one of the advertisements in Japan for Soul Calibur 4 was literally just her breast and saying whatever the catchphrase was for the game at the time. So again, this comes down to marketing, and it's disgusting that they're still doing this, considering that 44% of gamers are women as of recent 2015 statistics.
Well, like when did it be okay? Like, why is it okay to sexualize in marketing? Do people actually buy it based on a breast?
Sex sells. That's the thing, though. I mean, take any basic comm course. I mean, people are. It's not even sex either. It's just it's titillation that's being sold here. It's the promise of something sexual. It's the promise of something, you know, naughty, and a lot of that goes back to our culture, American culture in particular, where you're encouraged to be over-sexualized and overstimulated and to look at titillation and go, yeah, that's what I want. But at the same time, women in particular face that Madonna whore complex sort of thing, where it's, you know, it's you can't be this, you can't be that, but at the same time, you know, you should be really experienced, but don't be too much of a female player or anything like that. I'm kind of going around in circles because it's a lot of just weird societal complex things, but I think it boils down to the fact that we have this weird sort of prudish culture in America, despite the fact that all of our advertising and media has titillation in it. And it's something that we have a hard time reconciling, I think.
So what do you think the sales would be if women weren't, like, over-sexualized in games? How drastic do you think the numbers would go down?
See, that's the thing. I don't know. I mean, we have plenty of games where women aren't sexualized. Like, look at the Mario Brothers series. There aren't sexualized women in that, and that sells millions of copies. Now, granted, that's based on a long-established franchise series over 30 years at this point. But, I mean, there aren't sexualized women in it, you know, and it's the same thing for a lot of other series. I mean, I'm going to bring up The Last of Us again. Ellie, fantastic character. She's not sexualized. The biggest quote-unquote controversy with her is that she's either this is going to get into spoilers, I'm so sorry. She's either I think it was lesbian or bisexual. I can't remember which right now. And but she is still a competent, capable woman, and then that was like a huge bestseller. So I think it boils down to character design.
Yeah, I definitely don't think that like sexual orientation really has a say in like whether or not like she's like a strong female, you know what I mean? Like you can be a strong female and be a lesbian, you can be a strong female and be bisexual, you can be a strong female and be straight, like whatever you want, like you're a strong female, like.
And even the characterization of strong female is a bit of a misnomer, because when people say strong female, a lot of the time they'll just mean physically strong. They're not looking at emotional strength or mental strength. I mean, look at the reboot of Tomb Raider, for example. Now, I didn't agree with a lot of it, especially the whole she has to be put into a traumatic situation, like almost getting raped, in order for her to be, a good character. But at the same time, she is not physically strong, but she is mentally strong and capable and able to sort of pull herself out of an awful situation due to that capability. And then she gradually becomes physically strong and this and that. There's a lot more to a character, male or female, than just physical strength. And games don't normally look at that aspect. And I'd be interested in seeing more games that do.
Mm-hmm. I honestly don't believe like it needs to be that much sex to sell a game. I really don't.
No.
I would like to agree, but I just the nature of video games as being a lonely hobby draws in a lot of lonely people. And I mean, I don't consider myself among those people, but I feel like there's such a large demographic of people who do nothing but play these games, and they almost see them as an outlet to kind of vent that kind of like that pent up violence, like, because video games are a very violent like not demographic, but it's a very violent culture, and then the pent up violence, pent up sex, like etc. I don't think it would be such a substantial like change, but there's a lot of people out there who will buy. There are these like, I guess consider like they're considered like sex sim games, and there's games where you just talk to women, you meet women, and there's even cases where you talk to guys and meet guys or whatever. But in Japan, for example, Japan has such a large demographic of what of just such a large video game demographic. There's actually a population problem in Japan because guys are playing too many video games, and too many video games that just simulate sex.
So they don't pursue it in real life.
So I would like to say, like, I personally, like, I'm a straight dude. I'm insulted personally when I'm playing a game and I'm really enjoying it and I feel like the gameplay is good and I like the feel of the game, and then you just get this woman character who's wearing like no clothes and I'm supposed to take her seriously. Like, I think it's insulting and it annoys me and it makes me embarrassed to consider myself someone who is a large like aficionado of video games. But I would really, really like to agree with you, but just the nature of the hobby in itself is lonely, and it requires time spent alone. And I think that I just from what I know about just Japan and the population problems in Japan, I unfortunately don't think I would agree with you, and it's unfortunate. I think it's just unfortunate.
Yeah. And that's a very fair point. You're absolutely right. I mean, I think the term for it, and again, I'm going to butcher this, is hikokomori or something to that effect, where a lot of it primarily male gamers are just staying at home, staying in their basements. They're 30, 40 plus years old, and they get their enjoyment out of, like hentai games and, perverted video games and sites and things like that, which, I mean, it's your life. Do what you got to do. But at the same time, it leads to a very sort of isolated life, and you're absolutely right about the population thing. I mean, Japan's birth rate is sort of at a crisis right now, and that definitely contributes to the problem.
I wouldn't say that it's all because of video games.
No. Yeah. But just that otaku culture sort of in general, and the fact that, to the best of my knowledge, again, please correct me if I'm wrong, that Japanese culture is very, very, strict, especially when from birth. You go to high school and you're very socially stratified into a particular thing, and it seems very pressure driven and pressure oriented, and if you don't fit within that mold of culture, you seem to kind of get left out on the sidelines. That's what it seems to be, at least from an outsider's perspective.
Plus you have like the whole like Rule 34, which I don't think we should get into, but but like it's a thing, and like, even if it isn't like necessarily like fully sexual in the game, you have that aspect of it, which is the same character just portrayed differently.
I had one class I think it was my anthropology class, that said that one of her friends was really into WoW and then created a female character, named it a female, and ended up having to delete that character because of all the different sexual harassment she was getting.
Yeah, that's part of the reason why I don't play online games anymore, or at least games not with friends. almost every time I would play, I'd get harassed. I play a lot of Left 4 Dead 2. I love Left 4 Dead 2, one of my favorite games. It's one of my favorites. I love zombies. Oh my gosh, it's just great. And every single time that I've played public, meaning not like with friends or in a friends only lobby, I have gotten crap from, again, predominantly male gamers, a couple from female, but predominantly male, saying all sorts of different gendered slurs, which I cannot repeat on the radio due to FCC regulations, strictly because I use a female alias on my Steam account, and because I tend to play the female characters. Like, I love Rochelle and I love Zoe, and I play them. I play the other characters too, but those are my preferred. And the amount of crap that I would get from gamers, again, like, I can't repeat what they would say. It was horrendous, and I stopped playing. I didn't want to take it anymore. Like, none of my other friends, all who happened to be male, got harassment. Some female friends didn't get it, thank God. But every time I played, I always got an issue, and I would just like sit back and be quiet and just play the game, and I would still hear it.
Is it based on the name or gameplay?
That's the thing, though. I don't know. I don't know.
I think it's like a fair, like if you're a female playing with a female character and you're doing very well, like, I feel like it kind of like threatens like the man. Like, you know what I mean? Like, how, because like the whole stereotype thing, like, women aren't supposed to be good at video games. So a woman, if she's beating me, that's wrong. Like, and so you try and like break down like the female like character so that she starts like, maybe she's like, oh, I shouldn't play video games anymore. And then like he's back to male dominating. Like, yeah.
Does anybody mind if I throw out another data point real quick?
No, go for it.
Okay. So there was an informal, it wasn't scientific, just an informal study in 2012 by a student, Emily Matthew. She threw out some questions to about 874 gamers and asked them things about harassment, about representation, etc. So one of the questions was, do you get harassed, or have you ever been harassed while playing an online game or playing video games? Only 35.2 participants responded yes to that question. However, in that 35.2%, 63.3% of them were women. Only 15.7% were men. Wow. So when it comes down to just harassment playing online games, like men definitely get harassed too. I can tell you the amount of, homosexual slurs and things like that that men get. But overwhelmingly, almost 4 times as more women experience harassment. And I think those numbers are very telling. I think it's still very much a quote unquote man's world in the gaming community, and it's something that's very disheartening when you're a female gamer just trying to play some games.
Do you ever foresee a change?
I think it's slowly shifting, and I mean it's very slowly shifting, especially when you consider all of the ramifications of hashtag Gamergate and all that controversy that happened, which I don't even know if we want to get into that. But like I said, recent statistics say that 45% of gamers are women, and more people are playing games on PC or playing games on their handheld devices, on mobile, on DS, and more women are getting involved in the hobby. It's just a matter of there's still that very tiny subset of the hardcore gamers, and they're a minority, but they're a very vocal minority who say, no, this is a men's only space, and women are trying, the SJWs are trying to take over our games and change our games, and the feminazis are trying to do, and it's like, no, we're not trying to do anything like that. We just want better representation. And I think that the larger names, love or hate her, Anita Sarkeesian, Zoe Quinn, Brianna Wu, etc., they are trying to, or attempt to trying to do some good. Maybe in sort of half-hearted, odd, not quite their ways, but they're trying to do some good. And I think larger proliferations of these names and more women in gaming will then help sort of turn the tide a little bit.
Yeah, I think that just goes back to the psychological factor, where if you were young, if you knew that you could play video games when you were younger, then it wouldn't be a problem.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I see the issue.
I think Anita Sarkeesian is a good example to bring up of men feeling threatened and kind of jumping at someone who's threatening their hobby and their space, because I've watched a bunch of her videos. I think she has great videos. She makes very good points about games. She's an unbiased perspective. She will point out just the ills that like video games spread, and like one after the other she'll show clip after clip after clip of an absolutely factual moment in a game. She'll never like deem these as like poor games or whatever, but then you see these guys jumping, like sending her rape threats, death threats, this, that, like as though she's like attacking them. But she's not. She's merely trying to create a safer space for more people to be able to be enveloped in the hobby. Like, I don't even understand what's inherently masculine about playing video games that's causing men to be angry at people challenging the notion that it's not just a man's space. Like I said, like they send rape threats to her, death threats. Like there are videos where she just talks to, well, I got this, I got that, I got that. Like from all these people saying this stuff, I don't get it.
And here's the thing about Anita Sarkeesian, right? Like really, when you boil it down to what she is doing, she is making the basic of most basic media theory videos. Like she is dumbing down media critique and media theory in order to show her points. And I'm not saying there's anything necessarily wrong with that. Media literacy in America is absolutely horrendous, and sometimes you need to start at, your feminism 101, your media theory 101 in order to get a handle on it. But, I mean, really all she is doing is making videos talking about really dumb stereotypes that women have to deal with when it comes to representation in video games. And people are losing their minds over it. Like, it's incredible how visceral and vile the reaction was. And what kills me is that, she did her Kickstarter back in, I think, 2011 or 2012, something around there. It was already funded before any of the controversy happened. So it kills me when people are like, oh, she scammed people out of their money and she forced this. Like, no, she didn't do anything. Her project was already funded. If it wasn't for the huge amount of backlash, she probably just would have made her videos, went on her way, and she wouldn't have been this big, huge thing. But because a lot of gamers reacted in such a visceral way, now she's become a larger name in the culture because of their reactions. And, and I don't necessarily agree with all of her data. One of her points, she was talking about using women as objects. And I don't disagree with that. But one of her points, she played a game that I really enjoy, Fallout New Vegas. And she said, oh, you can drag a woman around as a ragdoll and throw her in a dumpster. Here's the thing. With Fallout New Vegas, you can drag anything around as a ragdoll once you've killed it by pressing the Z button. And there is no mission in Fallout New Vegas that I know of that you have to take a woman and throw her in a dumpster. So when she brought up that point, I was like, okay, look, now you're just sort of throwing things out there that are untrue. That being said, the majority of her work is labeled and true, that she's obviously doing her research. And just the reactions from gamers to this day are just disgusting from what she's doing when all she's doing is critiquing video games. It's a mess.
That's what she's known for?
Yeah, that's all she is. Like, she's not even a journalist. She's a media critic. She initially started work on a series called Feminist Frequency, where she'd look at pop culture in general through a feminist lens. So she did things like she worked with a feminist magazine whose name I can't repeat over the year to look at different tropes in media, such as the Smurfette principle, the Manic Pixie Dream Girl. She looked at some Christmas songs and pointed out some of the more problematic elements. And with each video game trope video that she makes, she points out that you can enjoy this hobby while still recognizing some of its more problematic elements. And people still completely go ape because of it.
As you were doing your research and documentary and thesis, was there anything that actually surprised you that you didn't expect to find out?
If anything, honestly, like I said, I tried to be as unbiased as possible because I've been harassed. A lot of it was sort of, well, this is just furthering what I kind of already knew, but bringing, more proof to it. If anything, the lack of research on how representation affects men has been so underwhelming. It's to the point of ridiculousness. And again, I bring up the earlier point of, men face body image, problems too. And men, people will argue that men, that these are just power fantasies, with the big bulky dudes and this and that. But I think it goes a lot deeper than that. I think we have to recognize that the representation of both men and women to men harm them in a lot of ways. I want to ping up one point here if you guys want to talk for a second so I can bring this point up. I got to find it.
I mean, if we want to go back to like the whole like manic pixie dream girl and all that stuff, like that's not only in video games, that's like in TV shows and movies and everything too. Like it's not, I mean, I don't know. I just, cause like, I mean, I frequent BuzzFeed, and on there like they'll have like, oh, like what type of girl are you in like a movie and stuff like that, quizzes and stuff and like most of the time like you can't get anything that's like the tough
actually
girl or anything. Yeah. Well, yeah, that's true too. But like, like they ask like generic questions and stuff like that, and like and you'll end up getting a something like Manic Pixie Dream Girl, and you're like, that's, if you actually knew me, that's not me.
Yeah.
But like, yeah.
I think for guys, it's in the media. It will make a guy to be more of themselves, because it's like they have to be over powerful, overly strong. You can't cry. You have to be the breadwinner, and it's like it plays mind tricks on the game, mind games on the mind. So it's like you see women. I don't know if like when being violent helps out either, you know. Because now the woman has to take on, I have to deal with an aggressive man. I might not be strong enough, but I'll try. So it's like for men, they have a lot of issues too when it comes to being portrayed in the media.
And there's so little research, at least as far as video games are concerned, but I'm sure media in general, that shows the effect of representation of the media on men. And I think that's a crying shame. It's something that should be looked at more in detail. And you hit the nail on the head with that too. It's about, power and passivity. Men are supposed to be powerful, women are supposed to be passive. They don't take into account not only how harmful that is to women. There's obviously powerful women or women who are more dictated by logic or whatever, insert stereotype here. But there's also men who are passive. There are men who don't want to be brought up with the power, plays and deal with all that. There's some men who like displaying their emotions, and anything in between that spectrum or in that it's fine. It's fine. It's part of being human. It's part of the diversity that we have as human beings. And the media would say otherwise. The media would say, no, all men have to be the breadwinner. All men have to be the power and the pants spreader. And it's just not the case.
And if you're too emotional as a male, you get the, you're gay, or were you raised around sisters, just negative things like that.
And that shouldn't be an inherently negative thing to say. Oh, well, you're raised around girls, like blah blah. Like that's like such.
There's nothing wrong
that
with
not
it.
only is that like kind of negative like towards the guy, like it's also that's negative and harmful towards women too, because you're making that out to be a negative thing. Like, oh, were you raised by a bunch of girls? Like, maybe I was. So what?
Yeah, and like mama's boys and stuff like that too. Like that's like, oh, you're a mama's boy. You cry to your mom, and you're just like, what's wrong with having a close relationship with your mom? Like I don't see it, because like
I love my mom.
Exactly, and I'm the opposite. Like I'm a girl, and I like me and my dad are very close. So it's like I don't see it like as being like a thing, like where it's just like, I don't know. I don't feel like men should hang out with their sons and women should hang out with their daughters. You know what I mean? Like it should just be like,
it should be an equal balance.
Exactly.
Like there's nothing wrong with being closer to your family.
Exactly. Yeah. Like, and so what if you're like closer to like one
male cousin?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I think a lot of that stems from like way back when the women would be at home and the women would take on the younger girls to show them how to cook and clean and take care of a house, and then the males would take on the younger boys and show them how to hunt and provide for the village. But in modern day society it's not like that. But I think that we have gotten a lot, we've progressed a lot from that.
Even having this conversation is progression,
right?
Because 40, 50 years ago, this conversation would barely, it would either not happen at all, or would be sort of taboo to talk about, especially on a public forum, because it's just, women, doing this, no, we can't have that. Men being emotional, no, men have to be, don't have to be James Dean all the time. That's how it works.
Empower hour, nonetheless.
Right.
So, you had gone to Canada actually over the for when you were doing your documentary. Who did you go to meet?
I went to go speak to Dr. Jennifer Jensen. Fun fact: she was actually the mentor for Anita Sarkeesian's graduate thesis work.
Oh wow!
And she was super excited to talk to me about it, and we had a conversation. And I should talk a little about the documentary, not to toot my own horn. It's called The Gender Glitch, and basically it's sort of a 13-minute sort of introductory into harassment, representation, and Gamergate, and how that affects women. And I did it mostly from the perspective of fellow gamers and from Dr. Jennifer Jensen. Dr. Jensen talked a lot about the more research end of it, about why, or she speculated on why things happened, and talked about a lot of the issues when it comes to women and why representation matters. If you look at some of her work and then at some of Jean Kilbourne's work, she talks a lot about how repeated, I guess what's the word I'm looking for here? Repeated imagery reinforces the message. So, for example, if all you see in games, for example, again, is a scantily clad, thin white woman, and that is like 99 point whatever % of the images of females that you see, that's going to reinforce the fact that this is the standard not only of beauty, but the standards of what all women should be held up to. And that's damaging for, people of color, people of size, and people who just are just sort of average and just don't want to really fit into those stereotypes. But when that's all you see, that's all you expect. And I'm not talking just video games at this point, because she branched out into media in general. We're looking at movies, we're looking at television. Most of the people that you see on TV are thin, white, young people. I mean, you're overlooking, a good chunk of your population that has no representation whatsoever. And that was sort of her main points that she discussed. The fact that you're not getting a wider representation of body size, not getting a wider representation of race, you're not getting a wider representation of age. I mean, how many video game protagonists are over 50?
Right.
There aren't a lot. Like, you have a lot of teenagers saving the world, but how many grown adults with families or how many older adults are going out there? I mean, there's some, but not anywhere near as much. How many fat protagonists do you see that are not stereotypically coded as fat? Like, I'm going to eat all the donuts and cake, guys. Or they're just there and they just happen to be fat. No, you don't get a lot of that. Not just in video games, but again in media. Mm-hmm. How many, and look at video games in particular, how many black protagonists do you see, or how many Latino protagonists do you see? Like, there aren't a lot. Now, granted, a lot of the games are being made in Japan, where it's predominantly Japanese, so they code them as Japanese or as white, but there are Western developers, and there's not a lot of protagonists of color either. So it's a lot of it has to do with representation and repeated imagery. And that was, and to answer your question, that was her overall sort of main point, that it hurts people when all you see is one particular type of person constantly in media.
Now, I know you just met, were you going to say something?
Oh, I was going to say, though, even like the few times that there have been, and obviously it is much better now, but like, for example, I remember like Grand Theft Auto San Andreas came out, and that has a black protagonist, CJ. I remember, that's the character's name. I remember that was faced with harsh criticism from people. People were very mad that that game was going to feature a black character that you played as. Gamers were mad. Like, people were just so then when the few times it does happen, the developers and the creators and the artists who work on this project, they're faced with all this backlash about it, and it's disgusting that people actually have, like, these are archaic views. Like, actually being angry at seeing someone represented that's not yourself.
And you know what the excuse is? It hurts my immersion. That's the
I don't
wider
identify
excuse.
with CJ. Like, oh, give me a break.
Right, exactly. It's the same reason why, and I've been on forums, right? Like, I've read the things that people write, and they're like, well, as a heterosexual white male, I feel like I shouldn't have to be forced to be a black person or be a woman or be somebody in the LGBT spectrum. And it's like,
you're not.
Nobody's
so stupid.
Nobody's what?
You're not being forced.
Right.
It's an option. You have a choice of like different characters, and you choose which one you would rather be.
Right.
Like,
and even if you don't, who cares?
It's a character.
It's a character.
And it's like they're also not putting themselves in the shoe of a woman gamer or an LGBT gamer or a gamer of color or whatever. I'm using of color just as a sort of a blanket statement, so I apologize if that's offensive. Just they're not realizing that, hey, maybe we want to play a game where you can play as a woman, or you can play as a different race, or you can play as whatever. And no, instead we get the stereotypical straight white dude. There's nothing wrong with straight white dudes, but that is all that is dominating.
It's oversaturation.
Yeah.
Gets old.
And even in like I guess latest Grand Theft Auto, you have option of playing like two like white guys, and like there's a black protagonist that you could play as. And I remember if I was playing the game, my roommate from my old apartment would walk in and be like, "Oh yeah, like that's the black character. They had to put him in to representation, blah blah." And no, like
Why do you need to make comments like
put
that?
it's just like frustrating to hear statements like that when a character is it's a made up thing. No, I'm sorry, but it's just.
No, I know.
But yeah, it's not necessary. It's not a real person.
Yeah.
It's a thing that was like someone's imagination was like, hey, this character would look cool like that.
What threatens you when you see someone represented that isn't so close to how you are? Why is that? Why is it even worth noting? Not even as a complaint, but as an observation. Like, oh, they had to put that in.
Right.
No, they didn't.
Racism. That's the only thing I can think of. There isn't enough data. And people aren't willing to admit that they're racist.
Right.
Again, I'm not saying that every complaint is coming from a racist. Every person that says this is racist, that's ridiculous. But what I am saying is that when your only complaint is that, oh, it's because they're a woman, or oh, it's because they're black, that doesn't really speak highly of you and of your reasons to avoid playing as a character.
I want to play something. It's a sneak peek that if you can actually find the gender glitch on Facebook, and this is a sneak peek to it. I think.
I remember ever since I was little, like, because I would play Pokemon, that you would always, there wasn't the question, are you a boy or are you a girl, that Professor Oak would ask, up until Crystal, and I never got to play Crystal, and I was always sad because I'm like, oh, I wanted to play that because you get to be a girl. And there's that option of that, or like in Harvest Moon, where it's just like, you get to be a girl, and once when that came around, it's just like, this is so awesome.
Wow.
I mean, and that was one gamer who grew up as a girl, grew up playing games, and when I had that interview with her, she was just so excited to finally be able to play a Pokemon game where you could choose your gender. I mean, that little thing made her so happy, and that's really all that you need to do, I think. I mean, it's not that hard to animate a walk cycle. It's not that hard to incorporate different animations or different clothing or different hair, whatever, in order just to make your gamers that much more happy. I mean, she was so thrilled by that one tiny change.
I've heard the excuse that it's like somehow like more difficult to animate like a female body or some garbage like that. I don't know. Like I've heard that complaint with video games. I've even heard that from from animators, like I guess the latest like Disney movies, Frozen and Tangled. The female protagonists in those movies, they all look almost exactly the same. Between Tangled and there's three protagonists between those three movies. They look almost exactly the same. Their facial structure and everything. I'm not an animator or anything. I can't speak as like how difficult it would be to animate a girl versus a guy, but like I don't understand what.
At least Frozen had an excuse because they were sisters and there was family, and it was like, okay, there's at least an excuse for there being similar facial features and stuff. But you're absolutely right.
That's three characters in a row that look exactly the same. And even if you look at the mom and Frozen looks exactly the same, her face.
I'm trying to play
That's
devil's
five
advocate.
characters now.
Yeah. But like, it's true though. Somebody brought that up when they were playing Assassin's Creed Unity, and they were like, how much harder would it have been to incorporate a couple of female assassins? And Ubisoft was like, well, it would have taken so much more time and so much more money, and that was their go-to excuse. But then a couple of indie developers, not even AAA, indie developers were like, no, I mean, it might just take more time to model, a female walk cycle or something, but it's like, it's really not that much more difficult. It's just an excuse. So it really isn't. I mean, you have to recount labor and motion capture and voice acting if you wanted to include women, but it's not that much more work when you're spending millions of dollars in development for a game. I mean, look at Metal Gear Solid, and
God.
I mean, we can get to Quiet.
Oh yeah.
But it's I don't know if you guys want to touch on that,
It's
but
a joke.
But I mean, there's a female character in it.
I recently played Metal Gear Solid 3, and, for the most part, as far as characterization of, like, both men and women, it's pretty equal. There's actually a lot of great female characters in that game, great women that are, I think, are very well written. But, okay, so you play as Snake, he's the male protagonist, and during cutscenes, you have the ability, like, let's say, like, you're trying to, like, observe something really close, you could press R, and you could kind of, like, you're with your binoculars, you're seeing, like, an enemy base or whatever, and keep in mind, this main character, he's supposed to be, like, a really hardened, like, he's seen it all, like, he's gone through, like, so much, he's such a hard guy character, and there's this one woman in the game, her name is Ava, and she, like, adventures with you throughout the game. Almost every cutscene she's in, you press the R button, look at her cleavage.
I know we have to.
It's a joke.
I know we have to wrap up, but just really quick. The Metal Gear Solid series is one of my favorite series, and it's always been a really great bastion of female characters, particularly when it comes to the boss. The boss was somebody who was like the mother of all armed special forces, and she taught all these guys the basics of close quarters combat, and fantastic. 5 kind of shifted all that and went, here's a character that's scantily clad with big boobs, and we hope you like the squishy boobs on her action figure.
Oh yeah. Oh jeez.
That's wrong. It's just so wrong.
All right, well, that does it for this week of Empower Hour. I hope you really liked this conversation because I certainly was very entertained.
It's a good topic.
Sorry for domineering most of the conversation.
Oh, no, it's fine.
Well, you gave us a lot of good facts. I loved it.
All right.
It wasn't just opinion.
So you listen to 91.3 WBNY, Buffalo's original alternative.
WBNY could play the hits.
Can't explain all the feelings that you're making me feel. Never driving you behind the steering wheel. Steering wheel, steering wheel. Ah, touching you.